How are you supposed to follow up a game like Suikoden 2, a game so good that many consider it to be one of the greatest RPGs ever? In fact, Suikoden 2 was so popular in Japan, it even had two spin-off games called Suikogaiden, which was dedicated to expanding the story and some character backstories from Suikoden 2. Even in my own review, I kinda just end up praising the game to no end. Well, it'd be 3 years later on October 22nd, 2002 that Konami would release Suikoden 3, a game that intended to shake the foundation of the entire series, introducing many new mechanics and changing existing ones. But this was not to be done without some trouble during the end of the game's development. Generally speaking, most of the team from Suikoden 2 returned to work on Part 3. However, around June 2002, 1 month before the game's Japanese release, a fair amount of the development team left Konami, including series creator Yoshitaka Murayama. The reasons for their departure have never been confirmed. Regardless, programmer Kiichi Isobe took over as the game's senior director. From this point on, the remaining Suikoden 3 team, as well as the team behind the Suikogaiden games, would work together and take over the series' development. So, how did the game turn out? Is Suikoden 3 the next revolutionary step forward for the series, or is this transition to the next console generation a misstep? Well, let's get right into it, shall we? Taking place something like 10 or more years after Suikoden 2, the story of Suikoden 3 is seemingly unrelated. There are a couple of reoccurring characters and some references to previous games, but the overall narrative is largely told as a standalone story. The story centers around the conflict between the 6 clans of the Grasslands, the city of Zexen, and the kingdom of Harmonia. Just like Part 2, you'll get much more of the story if you had played the other 2 games prior, and if you're 1 in 600 people that own a physical copy of Suikoden 2, you can import your save data, with the benefit of improved stats and some other bonuses to your characters. Suikoden 3 immediately separates itself from previous games in that its story uses the Trinity sight system, telling the story through the point of view of 3 different protagonists, each belonging to a different faction. Unlike the other 2 Suikoden games, each of these 3 are not silent characters. They have names, personalities, and more importantly, dialogue. First, there is Hugo, son of the chieftain of the Keiran clan, then there's Chris, a female knight commander of the Zexen Knights, and finally, there is Jito, a mercenary leader who along with his unit is looking for the true rune of fire and someone called the Firebringer. Being that there are 3 points of view in the narrative, you'll be able to witness various events from the perspective of different characters. Some of these events are unique to a given character, and others being present within each character's story, granting players a better understanding of the overall plot. The story consists of 5 chapters, with each character having 3 distinct chapters of their own. The length of each chapter varies depending on the character, which makes for some particularly odd pacing for the first 10 or so hours of the game. There's also a 4th character, Thomas, who serves as the protagonist of a few side stories managing a castle. As a whole, this new type of narrative progression is very effective and makes for a story that is compelling from start to finish. However, as I mentioned earlier, the game's pacing can be all over the place. For instance, Chris's chapters are fairly short and easy, whereas Jito's chapters involve tons of difficult encounters. Typically, his chapters are much longer to complete. I would personally recommend rotating through each character, 1 chapter at a time, to get the most out of the story. Overall, I really enjoyed this method of storytelling, and I kinda preferred to having a single silent protagonist as we did in previous Suikoden games. All in all, the story does a great job of portraying its world and characters, and is easily on par with Suikoden 2. While the overarching narrative is still very good, it does take a little while to get really interesting and engaging. Just like every previous game in the series, Suikoden 3 has 108 stars of destiny that you need to recruit. Recruiting works relatively the same way as before, and begins as early as Geode's first chapter. The recruits themselves are as usual interesting characters, and it's quite fun to play with formations to find which party members can use unite attacks and what have you. Once again, having the 3 different points of view also helps to flesh out a good majority of the cast, as you'll see many of them across every chapter. If I had one nitpick about the overall narrative, is that the importance of who the game's main antagonist is will be lost on anyone who has yet to play previous games, but either way, this is a game you definitely play for its story. The way the narrative is presented is far from the only change, as most of the gameplay systems from the original 2 games are completely different now. For instance, there's no longer an overworld, instead the game is a world map and you simply select your destination 1 point at a time and travel there. Normally, I might be bothered by this, but Suikoden 3 kinda benefits from it since it cuts down on the transit time and makes it easier to revisit towns when hunting for the Stars of Destiny. As well, most dungeons were big enough to satisfy my need to explore. However, it is annoying that in order to travel, you'll need to go through the same forest, plains, and mountains over and over again. But the most radical change to the formula is the battle system. As before, you can have up to 6 members in your active party, however, your characters are now set in pairs in your formations, one in front and the other in back. During combat, you give the same commands as the previous games, like attacking, defending, using items or runes, unite attacks, and auto-battling. Thing is, you cannot issue specific commands to both characters. Consider you want a character to use a rune spell. The caster will do so, but that character's paired partner will use a normal attack. This can prove problematic in various combat scenarios, like if you need a character to heal or defend. This is especially an issue as enemies, particularly the bosses, can use the new skill system to counter physical attacks. Suikoden 3 introduced a new type of character progression in the skill system. After each battle, your characters are awarded money, experience, and skill points. Skill points are used to improve the rank of different skills. Skills have the ranks from E to A, with the higher the rank improving the chances of them being active in battle. But skills can only be improved by talking with teachers and towns and castles. Skills can range from increasing the damage of an attack, countering physical attacks, increasing the odds of landing blows, etc. You can also use your skill points to improve the magical capabilities of a character, such as learning new rune spells and in reducing the casting time, as some spells can take multiple turns to use. For the most part, this new skill system is really neat and allows players to have more variety when playing or replaying the game, trying to figure out which skills work best for each character. But, as I mentioned earlier, enemies and bosses have access to this skill system as well, which during the beginning of the game can almost turn any encounter from a one-side slaughter on your end to a crushing defeat. The worst part is each skill has a chance to activate during a turn in battle, which can make some encounters feel like the winner is randomly determined. Even if your party has the best equipment, skills, and stats, they are still to some extent at the mercy of this skill system. This drove me crazy throughout each character's first chapter, as many battles suffered from having insane difficulty spikes. But once you start recruiting characters using parties of 6 and upgrading your own skills, this issue becomes practically non-existent. I also noticed that most equipment and items are really expensive. Even staying at inns cost hundreds of dollars from the beginning of the game. As such, I found myself buying lottery tickets at every chance and fighting every optional boss, all of which respawn after a little while. These fights grant awesome rewards like runes, items, and a crap ton of cash, which you'll need. But there is still more that's different. Army battles have also changed once again. The tactical RPG battle system has been replaced by what is best described as a strategy board game, in which different army units are presented as pieces on a board. Once different pieces are adjacent to one another, they will engage in a regular battle between the two. I actually really like this system. It makes you consider the position of your troops, who is in each unit, and the strategy in each individual battle. Overall, I think most of these changes are very interesting, and in some cases work better than the systems they replaced, but in some cases, like the inability to fully control all members of your party, or the skill system early on, can lead to some frustration and game overs. My biggest issue with the game is that it takes quite the time investment, as the game is roughly 60 to 80 hours long, which is in stark contrast to the brisk pace of the story and combat of previous games. Being a PlayStation 2 title, Suikoden 3 embraced a new dimension, and the entire game is in 3D. The days of sprites are now gone. In replacement, we have some very low poly character models and some modest looking environments. The game's graphics on a whole are rough around the edges, which is a shame since the character designs are so good. In fact, some designs are so strong they make their respective character model look better despite their lack of detail on the individual character models. Just for reference, this game released after titles like Final Fantasy X, which look worlds better in comparison to this game. But to be fair, this game is quite large and had a much smaller budget than a Square Enix game. Overall, Suikoden 3 looks like a beefed up N64 game, and not a game 2 years into the PlayStation 2's life. As such, the visuals have not aged all that well, although the game has a few animated cutscenes and the entire intro is animated, and looks completely stunning. Thankfully, the game's sound is up to series standards and sounds great. Like every game before it, the music is always appropriate to the situation it is used in, and sound effects sound crisp and clear. The game's opening song in particular is a standout track that I still have stuck in my head. Now, I know this review kinda seems all over the place. I really like the game's storyline soundtrack, but I have some issues with the moment-to-moment gameplay, the game's pacing, and visuals. But that's to be expected. The team nailed it with Suikoden 2 and essentially perfected the formula established from the original. The developers had two choices: use the same mechanics as in 2, or try to be innovative and shake things up a bit. Despite some of my grievances, I have to applaud their efforts for all the risks they took with this game. While the visuals are underwhelming and the gameplay can drag at times, I still enjoyed my 67 hours with this game. This is one of those cases in which I can kinda overlook my issues with the game since the overall experience is so enjoyable. However, I wouldn't recommend this game over the first two, and I wouldn't even recommend this to a newcomer. Start with 1 and 2, then go to 3 to get the most out of it. While Suikoden 3 is still a great RPG, I don't think it quite has the must-play status as the two that came before it. As of this recording, the game has yet to see a digital release on the PlayStation Network, but it is rumored to happen. But with the current state of Konami, who knows? As such, it is only available as a PlayStation 2 disc. The game demands a much lower price than its predecessors and typically goes from somewhere around 30 to 50 bucks online. Honestly, for 30 bucks with this game's value, I'd say it's worth it. So, that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed the review, and join me next time for part 4, in which I'll be looking at what most consider to be the low point of the series. As always, been Darren the Gaming Pilgrimage. Till next time. Hey guys, thanks as always for watching and your patience. I was hoping to have this video up a week sooner, but Suikoden 3 is a very long game, and as such it took me a little bit more time to play through it. I sound a little funky in the video. I was coming down with a cold and I really wanted to record before I got too sick to actually make the video. I didn't want another situation where it took, like 2 months to make a video. As always, if you liked the video, you should press the like button, or if you want to see more, you should always subscribe. If you didn't see part 2 of the retrospective, you can always click right here to go to that. Well, thanks as always guys. See you later.